action. Hey, welcome back to the Real Estate Excellence Podcast. Great show in store for you today. I have a 25-year agent who has won countless awards of recognition. She's a 5-star award-winning realtor. She is an ambassador for the Buffini and Company. She is an author. And reading that book, watching her videos on YouTube, I have prepared a great conversation today. Let's welcome this top producing agent with Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate Lifestyles Realty, Wendy Griffis, to the show.
Hey, Tracy.
Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. This is going to be fun. I'm excited.
I am too, because I'm hopefully we can compact it in. And anyone listening today, get out your notepad. I'm try not to go beyond my normal time, but with your book, and I was diving into it, and as we were talking pre-show, talking to all the great agents, we touch on one or two things in your book, but I want to go through it in depth. From the standpoint, you've got some quotes in there, and we'll talk around it because you've evolved your chapters around, and obviously some of the case studies in there, and just expand on it, because I think it's really a tool. Like you said, sometimes you got to hear it in your life 5-10 times. Now, how many times we've been told to eat better, exercise, whatever, and then at some point we're like, you know what? That's what we're going to do.
I'm going to do. Yeah, I think I shared with you one of my favorite things is we don't always need more training. We just need to be reminded. And that's been my journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I've taken training and taken little pieces here and there. And then I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And then I add a little bit more and a little bit more.
Yeah.
So
We finally make that step and take that journey. So, you've been on other podcasts. So I think a lot of people, if they follow you, I don't want to spend too much in the pre-real estate, because there's so much in your real estate career that I want to dig into. But, you went to Bishop Kenny.
I did. So I've been a native here since 1977.
Okay.
Seen a lot of change. Met my husband while I was in college at UNF.
Okay.
So, and ironically, we were just doing some statistics, and in 1993, when we met, Jacksonville had 635,000 people. We now have 1.7 million.
Oh wow, almost 3 times.
So it's really grown quite a bit. I've been here through it all.
And that's just Duval County.
Nope, that's Duval, Quad County. So,
okay.
Nassau, Duval, St. Johns, and Clay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and probably within the next few years we'll be breaking the 2 million.
It's going to be amazing.
Yeah. Going to UNF though.
Yes.
Real estate probably wasn't, even though did they even offer real estate? Because that's actually a major, right?
It
at
is
UNF?
now. So go back in the late 80s, early 90s, and I love math, so I was going to be a math teacher. That was actually my dream. And then I realized
I went down that route too.
Yeah, and then I'm like, okay, math teachers don't make quite as much as I want to. You're kind of capped there.
Right.
And so I kind of floundered a little bit trying to figure out, okay, well, what do I do? Because I got a degree in statistics with business, and that has some applications, but it was kind of tough. And so anyway, I kind of floundered a little bit, had several jobs, just trying to figure out my path. Started doing project management, which I excelled at, and quickly moved up the ladder. But then Y2K hit in 2000, and everybody was losing their tech jobs, including me. And I had just bought my first house. So I was 29 years old. Mm-hmm. Newly-ish married, and I loved my realtor. Like, I think I drove her crazy. Like, after every showing, we'd stand out in the driveway and talk for 20 minutes and then go to the next house, right? Yeah. So I remember calling her and saying, hey, I just lost my job. It was January of 2000. Can you make it?
What was going on? I'm trying to remember. I don't understand Y2K, but why were they cutting the tech jobs?
So the biggest thing is there was a huge ramp up to 2000 to get all the computers.
Well, you had the .com boom going in the 90s.
So the company I worked for, over a course of a few years, got bought, and then eventually they're gone. They were just
the services they were offering weren't
no
valuable.
Longer needed. Yeah. And I would say that company closed its doors within 3 months of me getting let go in January. Mm-hmm. And I remember what was crazy about that is I took it very personally. Like, what could I have done differently?
Right.
And what I learned during those times is you can't take it personally, right? Like, at the end of the day, that's just the reality. So anyway, long story short is I called my realtor and said, hey, can I make any money in that real estate thing? I need to replace the salary. Mm. And she said, come on in. The water's warm, Mm-hmm. And it was a small little mom and daughter brokerage. And to this day, I'm so grateful for that opportunity that they gave me because, new agents, that's really tough, right? Like, okay, what do I do now? And I was really lucky. The broker, she mentored me in the beginning. So that was, it was a nice way to get started.
Did you have any inclination that it could come what it's become today for you?
Great question. Back when the Northeast Florida Association of Realtors had an office off of South Side, they were selling bricks. And I want to say this might have been 2006. So I'm like a 5-6 year, I'm still getting my momentum going.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought a brick and I wrote the word possibilities on it. So not so much, nobody has a vision of where they're going to be in 25 years. I mean, you can, but I just knew in my heart that there was possibility for growth that I didn't really, I didn't feel like I had anywhere else in corporate America. So, yeah.
So talk about, because I think it's important, especially for anyone, well, and it's not necessarily new. We use the term new, but to me, for you, it sounds like the first 5 or 6 and having, listened to you talk to others and so forth, that first 5 or 6 weren't, stellar years, where you just exploded. You kind of trudged your way into the, through the business initially. So there's a lot of agents I think are in that category. Either that or they're out.
Yeah.
Right. Because, obviously we know many of them don't renew the first 2 years.
Everybody thinks it's so easy and so glamorous.
Yeah.
Right? And they're like, you got to work.
But and we're going to talk about grit a little later on, but you had the grit to stay in it. And there was something, what was your kind of like your carrot? There's like, I can do this.
Yeah.
I can do this. Because 5 or 6 years go by, most people would have been like, well, I'm seeing her there. She's, only been doing it 2 years and she's tripling my business.
Yeah.
I can't, she's good, I'm not type of attitude.
I appreciate that. And so it's, it's always a journey,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's always great to look back on your journey and go, oh yeah, that makes sense. I connected those dots. While you're going through it, you may not be seeing the dots, right? So I actually, my first year, I think I sold like 6 houses, right? I didn't know what the heck I was doing.
Still good for a first year.
Right?
for many.
Yes.
Yeah.
But once I started to really understand what the consumer needed, I was easily selling 20 homes or more a year by my second year.
Okay.
And but what happened for me is it was less about like the production, like, okay, here's what I want to do, or that I can do it. Is that, how do I frame this? I just went to work. Like I was looking for income, right? So I just went to work. The reality is, though, nobody really told me you should stay in contact with your past clients, do all these kind of things. Until about 2006.
You didn't know the definition of a CRM.
Right.
That wasn't even like a...
We didn't really even electronically, like I had a Christmas card list, right?
Right.
That was like on a Word document. That was the extent of our CRM.
Yeah.
So you have to date yourself a little bit. That technology has changed quite a bit, but I think it's just helped us be better servers, for our consumers, keeping up with everything. But I just felt like I just needed to work, and I just kept showing up. I think one of the things that a newer agent struggles with is where do they get their information, and what do they do every day? What does that look like? And I just went to work, and so didn't even really think about it. And I was really lucky because a lot of my clients did refer me in my early career. And I didn't know there was a difference between, working by referral versus like they want to teach you on calling expireds and for sale by owners. And I did not want to do any of that. So it was either relationships or I'm out,
One of the things you bring up in the book, there's a section in there, salesy. You talk about that.
Yeah.
And when you just said that, that you didn't even really think about, or no one ever said, hey, you should stay, because you didn't grow up with a sales mindset. You were wanting to be a math teacher, and then you were a project coordinator, doing those types of things. And now you go into a sales world, which is a totally different thing. A good friend of mine, we were at a dinner with some people, and he said, the disconnect between IT and sales is so huge because IT has all these, things that they can do, but they don't know what the salespeople need to do. There's this disconnect. So
Yeah.
you make this leap into sales, and it's like, oh, I didn't realize that. Oh, my technology guys could be keeping track of all these people for me, and all that kind of disconnect. And obviously, it's so important today. A company that has sales, that their back office understands what the salespeople need, the ammunition they need out on the street
Yeah.
to do their job.
Well, it's interesting because I did not want to be in sales, like at all. And I remember thinking that real estate is not sales. That's how I framed it in my head. I am not selling anybody anything. I am helping a consumer either get their property sold so they can move on or whatever, or I'm helping a buyer identify the property and then procure it, right?
Mhm.
And there's a lot of steps that go along in that, but really, and that's why I had that uncomfortable feeling of like, I don't want to be considered a pushy salesperson. So I really dove all in on being a professional, like trying to be the most professional that I could possibly be to differentiate myself from being a salesperson, which is how the consumer perceived real estate. You know, we're down there with
Because you're thrown under that category.
We are,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I mean, you could talk. And now, let me back up and say this: there probably are people that go into this with, they bring the listing paperwork and sign here, and they do those hard sale tactics. And I never wanted to do anything like that, so it worked out great that I didn't have to.
Yeah.
And I think that the consumer resonated with that in my early career because they're like, she's good at what she does, and she cares about me.
Taking more of a consultant role.
100%.
Yeah.
And I that's really been on my heart is how our industry is perceived, which is how I ended up writing the book because I really wanted to break that mold. Of course, it's one little voice out there screaming it, but there are quite a few really great professional agents out there, and one bad apple, tarnishes the whole bunch, but it shouldn't be that way.
Sure. I want to mention our sponsor, as my regular people know, Remy Graphics. Makes these nice mugs. You got a nice hot pink one in your, well, actually, I think yours is blue too. I've added the pink one.
I like
So you got
them.
blue. You're good. Remy Graphics makes these great mugs for us, puts the logo on there. She's local. We'll make one-offs for you. So if you want to personalize it, John and Sally, welcome to Jacksonville, whatever, she will do that. She has many other laser engraved glyphs. Products. RemyGraphics.com, RemyGraphics.com. Thank you, Donya, for that. The book.
Yes.
So what I'm hearing is, like many of us, we've been to all these trainings. Were you involved in Buffini at this time?
So great. Let me, because I think let's jump to that and
Yeah.
then we'll explain the book. So
Yeah.
ultimately, what ended up happening is I kept hiring business coaches. And I would say this started about 4 years into my journey, mostly because I was like, I don't know everything. And where do I need some help, right? I just knew I needed help. I needed some direction. And I remember I hired one company and they just wanted me to do option contracts and how to do that. I'm like, no, that's not the kind of training I want, right? And then I went with another training company and they tried to teach me other stuff and none of it resonated. And so I randomly, on accident, or however you want to call it.
That's how I call it.
January of 2006, I'm sitting there at a Brian Buffini conference in Orlando, and it's the first session, and he's talking about building a relationship-based business. And I'm like, ding, 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 that is how I am aligned. You're speaking my language. I'm signing up. And I immediately signed up for his training programs, his coaching programs, all of the marketing stuff he did. So, and so this is 2006. My book is 2019. So there's a 13-year gap in there. And a lot happened during those times, particularly just in time for the Great Recession. Am I learning these concepts, right? And so now I am, hosting client events. I'm doing all these relationship-based marketing things and falling in love with my customers. But now I'm having like really painful, difficult conversations that they're losing their house, they're losing their job. Like we went through that short sale period between 2006 and I want to say 2000. It was really, it lasted for me. I didn't really see a change. We flattened out around 10 and 11, but it really wasn't until 12 that it really started to go back up again. But those were hard conversations to have, but I think it created some loyalty because I would I would work for somebody sometimes for a year and never get paid, right? But I still showed up. And, we went through some very difficult times personally also.
Mm-hmm.
My husband lost his job. He was unemployed for a couple of years. Um, Real estate was not doing so great. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to quit. Truthfully, we talk about people lasting.
Mm-hmm.
And this was around 2010, I think it was 11. And I'm like, I can't do this
You
anymore.
get filled
Can't
up.
feed the family, right?
Yeah.
Like this is not working. And, but nobody would hire me
Mm-hmm.
because I'd been a realtor for 10 years, right? So they're like, what skills do you have? I'm like, I have a lot of skills, but it didn't translate. And so I'm like, all right, well then I'm burning
That's
my
not always.
ships.
That's one of the things that mind boggles me in
Yeah.
life. How someone else out there who's not in our industry, or it could be any parallel industry, has no idea what you do
Yeah.
and has no way to put themselves, at least in some way, in your shoes, in some way, shape, or form. Like,
Yeah.
hey, what does a real estate agent do? Well, she must be calling on people. She must be having conversations with people. Now, today with the internet, you're seeing all the social media showing what real estate agents, the podcast here, agents talking about what they're doing. So people are actually getting real life. But the fact that you could go through life as an individual and not realize that what the person next to you is doing on a daily basis,
Yeah.
at least in some sort of 30,000 foot level, what their day is like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I did have somebody approach me to, follow me video camera day in the life of a realtor. And I'm like, it would not be that interesting of a show because all you're going to do is see me on my phone, texting, talking,
Yeah.
emailing. Like that's the majority
Being
of
a
my
therapist.
day. Right. And then I might show a house or two a couple times a week, or I might meet with a seller a couple times a week, but it's not, what you see on TV in the Instagram world is
Yeah.
not necessarily the reality of what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so, because of course it's always the highlight reel. Right. Well, what about the low light reel? Does anyone want to see that? Probably not.
They
but
want to
that's
see you
what
going
we
and
do.
cleaning toilets and vacuuming
Well,
people's
I will
homes
say that
before.
I don't do that. I got a guy. But they don't see the emotional stress that this industry will put upon someone who really is wanting to serve, but sometimes, not all, but sometimes the consumer on the other side's they haven't broken that trust barrier yet, right? So they're still thinking you're trying to sell, right? And there's a difference there.
You bring up you just gave me a thought in my head. Every real estate agent should have a camera set up basically in their kitchen,
Right?
right? Where we're at most of the time doing, and the calls that you get after 6 o'clock,
Oh, yeah.
and the conversations you have.
Yeah.
Some are business, some are right there. Many times it's therapy and pulling people off the ceiling and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But people don't realize that if you're going to be a good at your business, relationship,
Yeah.
you've got to answer the phone after 6 o'clock because that might be the right time for that person to focus on the mission at hand, buying or selling the home.
So, it's interesting you say that because I actually learned over the years to, what's the word I'm looking for? Put boundaries on my life. Now, do I answer the phone after 7? Absolutely. Have I had like that? I'm going to be really tired when we talk, but I'll talk to you if it needs to happen tonight.
Right.
I'll circle back around and say, sales versus running a business, right? And that difference. And a lot of agents get into the business and they're just thinking about making sales, which was me. I just need to make sales.
Yeah.
But really, 2006 is when I started to shift. I own a business. How am I going to run this business? How am I going to have a sustainable business for the rest of my life? Because now I've run my ships. I ain't going anywhere,
You've been in the business long enough. You've seen so many people come in and out.
Yeah.
I personally believe that a lot of agents only barely look 90 days in advance, if that far.
Yeah.
And now, because I'm sure your business would have been different if someone told you from day one, hey, that first customer, you need to be calling them 70 times, saying hi, birthday, whatever,
Yeah.
and right from the beginning. Because I've had some great people just say one of their regrets. George with Christina Welch's team, he said one of his biggest regrets was not nurturing that circle of influence or that sphere of influence earlier in his career. and which should be is, a lot of people teach that for day one. Okay, what's your list? What clubs are you involved in? What
Yeah.
other things? Let's start nurturing those people.
Yeah, I was really lucky because I did, get exposed to these concepts 6 years in. Gosh, I would have loved it year one, right?
Mhm.
But truthfully, I was able
But
to
did
go
it
back.
mean more? Did it mean something to you now you had sales under your belt that you now knew where to stick it?
Yeah, maybe. So it's weird. So the interesting thing about this industry is we want to say I did this, so I got that.
Yeah.
It doesn't work
Yeah.
like that.
That's
right?
human
It just
nature.
doesn't.
Yeah.
It's human nature, right, to
And-
say that. So I've been really fortunate to be part of the Buffini and Company organization because they do provide the foundation for building a real estate business or any sales service business, but they also have a personal growth arm that I would have never been exposed to had I not been with that group. And I think that is one of the key things. Everybody talks, okay, let's talk business, but we are not linear business, whatever. But to your point, we say, how are you doing? Oh, I had a good month. How are you doing? I had a good month. So I recently just did a post because we're starting the new year, and I always do a screenshot of all the homes I sold in the previous year, right? And so 43 homes from 2024. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what year, right?
Yeah.
But that says, okay, now I'm done and moving on to start over. But the reality is, if you build your business correctly, that's just compounding to the next year.
It's a snowball.
Right? Snowball,
Mhm.
yeah. And so I don't look at it as, okay, this is my year. Even though we do, that's our industry. And we did have a good month, did have a good quarter, did have a good year. Of course, that all matters. But am I building a business for the long term? That's my focus. And so if you look back at my career, now I'm 850 plus sales in my career. And that to me is like a lifetime achievement that I'm going for, not what did you do this year, what did you do this month.
All right, so you started with Buffini in roughly
2006.
Six. Okay.
Then we lost everything.
Yes.
During the Great Recession. Had to start
That
over.
could be hold on, because I do want to get into the deep into the book, because I've made some a good dozen marks in here that I want to talk about, because I really think it's a great educational podcast
Sure.
for those listening. But you've been listening to Buffini for a dozen years at this point, doing his stuff, which I assume you're getting results because you stayed with him, right? You're
Absolutely.
getting something there. What brought you about to say, hey, I need to put this on the paper, as you said earlier?
For sure. So with Buffini, we have this, foundation of help, to get a coach and those kinds of things. And around the time I was writing my book, say 2018, 2019, that was when a lot of the tech companies were just, putting millions and millions of dollars into trying to capture, we'll call it, the dirty behind the scenes secret is, you go online and you click more information on this house, and you're really signing up to someone who paid
to get your
capture,
information,
to get your information, and then to sell you, right?
Yeah.
And I never wanted to do anything like that. And the consumer did not know. They just see this great website with lots of pretty pictures and great information. They're like, oh, this is great. Oh, I want to get more information. And so they just end up working with the first person that they clicked on. Now, that first person may be legitimately a great agent, but the consumer didn't know the difference, right? Like, could I have a better experience? And on the outside of looking at that, because I didn't follow those practices, I had many people say, oh my God, I had the worst realtor. I had the worst experience. And I'm like, how do I get the word out that you can have a better real estate experience? And that's kind of what started me down that path. I was part of multiple masterminds that talked about how important as a authority, once you have some experience, give that information back out to the world, right? So it's kind of an authority marketing piece. Say, oh, you wrote a book, you must know something. But it was really several people in my life at that time who said, yes, this is good information.
You and I are on the same page in that standpoint, because I started the podcast that we talked about earlier. What was the premise of actually getting day one? But as time has gone on, and now in 3.5 years in, at 2.5 years, we're hearing about the NAR settlement, right?
Yeah.
This lawsuit and all the brokerages, the big brokerages involved. And I feel the collateral damage is the fact that social media is out there and they start downplaying real estate agents.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've had clients, call on your listing. Oh, I don't want to be represented. I know what I'm doing. And, just that the value of real estate agents were degraded here. And so I'm like, I've said, well, actually, I mean, part of my podcast and what I've been doing for 3 years now is getting the stories and why people should be using real estate agents.
Yeah.
This is not, I don't care how many times. Actually, the pros still use real estate agents.
Yeah.
And they don't bother getting into the weeds, so to speak, with what the real estate agent is doing for them.
Yeah.
Keeping them out of the weeds. So what the value in putting that out there, and I think agents need to be more transparent for the betterment of the industry,
Right.
to say, hey, this is what we're doing. I mean, this is, from a financial side, on the loan officer side, yeah, we pull some people out of the deep weeds too.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we might get too personal that we don't, want to share someone's personal information, per se, or, mention that someone might know that person, talk about how bad their credit was, how messed up their finances are. They may make a lot of money. That doesn't mean their stuff is in order,
Well, and it's interesting you would say that because the first chapter of my book, and Brian Buffini always says it's first for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talks about emotional intelligence. And the reason why I put that
Good segue.
first,
We're segueing right into it. All right, let's go.
but the reason why I chose that is, and nobody wants to talk about, the consumer doesn't want to talk about that they may have stress issues, or they may have emotional stuff wrapped around this house, right? Like, because people always think, we're just.
I don't want to show my weakness. I don't want to show my Achilles heel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But buying and selling real estate is a very emotional process. Whether you are the seller, and my two favorite examples is, you get a seller who gets their home inspection report that a buyer just did on their house, and they take that very personally. Mm-hmm. But it's just a third-party objective view of, yes, there's a leak, and yes, there's a crack, but because people they live in these homes, and as it's almost like a child, right?
Right.
That then they are insulted that they got this report, right? And then on the flip side, you get a buyer who does this inspection, and they're like, oh my gosh, there's a crack in the wall, and they get over-emotional over something generally fairly mild, right? And so I think the value of a real estate agent is to put some let's calm through this and perspective and find a solution.
How many times when you think about all the different things that we do in life and we decide to do, it could be going to a movie.
Yeah.
We ask other people what they thought about the movie before we even go see the movie to validate our reason to go to the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the real estate agent comes in. They are the person who's done 850 transactions and are going to guide you through this home buying process, because they've done it 850 times and they still don't know everything.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. No,
in fact, I was driving over here today, and so I have a transaction manager. She's been with me 20 of my 25 years. I'm so grateful. Mm-hmm. But I text her and said, we have to add a new task because we have a closing today, and I shouldn't say this on film, but here we are. And we always give a closing checklist to our buyers to say, here's the things you need to do. Turn the electricity on for the day of closing.
Yeah.
And they didn't. And so now I'm like, okay, we have to add another task to remind them or follow up and just say, did you turn it on? Right? I mean, you wouldn't think you would have to do that. We're all adults, but at the end of the day,
that's what a real estate agent
that's
does.
What we're here to
make
do.
Sure to take that weight off your shoulders, the weight off your mind, and remind you of something as small as
turning the electricity
calling
on.
the power company and telling I'm closing, turn it over to me on that day. Yeah.
Yep.
So the first part, in just going in order in your book, and I suggest if you are, I guess, can you get this on Amazon? Is that where, or I mean, you have some copies, I guess, or you have, but I think everyone should read this book.
I love you.
Yes. No, it's really good. It's well written. It's very simple read. You can read it in one night, but it's like that thing. You're hearing all the things, but you're also relating that you've been doing these things. And you've obviously seen a return on investment.
For sure, 100%.
For some of these things, and which is, the importance, like you said, of writing it down, because now it's you're not losing that thought. You've actually put it in the book now, which part of your learning process, right? We take notes in class,
Oh,
we
yeah.
see it on the board, we write it down, we hear it, and you take it in. So the first thing you were just talking about a few minutes ago, the online, and I worked 12 years. The first 8.5 years were with Quicken Loans, which now Rocket, and then Loan Depot, working in the call center, taking all those types of leads. If the lead came directly to either on an 800 number from an ad on television, or came directly through the website, they went directly to Quicken's website. Those were considered priority, not prior. Those are prime leads,
Yeah.
because the customer's obviously going directly to, versus lower my bills,
Right.
or better rate doc, or all the different click things that these people have.
Sure.
And people don't realize how many times we got, because we were paying prime dollar, Quicken was anyway, and I'd get on the phone and go, oh man, I haven't even finished filling this thing out. The information's already being transferred before you even hit submit.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the big thing, they got recently trigger leads, obviously from Arlen. Another mortgage lender pulls your credit.
Yep.
It's going out to a bunch of other things. They're trying to stop it. It's been in legislation. There was some defense spending bill a month ago. I guess they dropped it out, but there's a push to stop allowing the credit bureaus to sell your.
I do realize that. And so if we framed it, we're in business to generate business, and we need. I hate the word leads. I call them potential clients.
Yes, that's good.
Okay, words matter, but our industry calls them leads, right? So again, we're already cheapening the relationship. Hey, I got this lead, whatever. But that is an okay thing to do if you're trying to generate business and you're just trying to get started. Back when I first started, we didn't have online because it was that didn't exist. So I did open houses, right? Just to get my name and get myself out there where the consumers are. So I understand that desire for the leads, but I don't think the consumer really understands that when they're clicking, they're being watched. And maybe they do. I think we're actually coming into a time period now where people are starting to realize, oh yeah, maybe that's not the best way to go about it. And I personally, as much as that NAR lawsuit was like, are you kidding me? I'm actually a little bit grateful for it, because I think it brought to light that our industry had gotten away from some of the professionalism, right? And
I think I want to use the term lazy. Just got a little lazy.
Well, and it's really easy to click on a thing. I want to see this house, and I'll just use that agent. I don't know if that agent's good or not, but it doesn't matter. And if that agent flubs up the deal, you don't know any better. You don't know any better, exactly. And so that's really where that came into.
Yeah.
So,
what do you say? Because I think there's a lot that, we know there's some brokerages that's working off those online leads is how their business model is.
Right.
There's others, but that I think would probably be the majority of agents, I would guess, have your kind of they want the relationship business model. They want to live off referrals, where literally each week they're getting a call from somebody. Hey, Sally referred me. She bought a house from you. Whatever,
right.
Type of thing. I mean, that's like the ideal. That's the, when I first got out of school, I actually went into car sales, and the story was about the old guy who sat at his desk all the time in the dealership, and people just came to him. He didn't even get out of his off his chair, and business kept coming because he had been in it so many years. So many people knew him, and everybody wanted to buy a car from him.
So and I heard. I think you interviewed Kim Knapp. She's one of my favorite people on the planet. And she said this early in my career, so I grabbed this. And it was, in your business, you can be a hunter or a farmer. Sometimes you're going to have to hunt. Yeah, I need to get out there and get business.
I need to eat tonight.
But if you are taking this as a career, right, then let's be a farmer. Let's plant those seeds. Let's till the soil, water, fertilize, give it sunlight, whatever. It's a little bit of a slower process, but then over time it just compounds and compounds and compounds.
Yeah. So the question that I wanted off of that is, you got I'm sure you've mentored new agents before, or you're I'm sure over at Better Homes.
Doing it.
Yeah, they have you come in and speak to them anyway. How do you help them get started? Because farming is great. If you've got really super fertile soil, you may be able to produce crops pretty quickly. Others, their soil is not so. Maybe they're very young and don't have, whatever it is.
Yeah.
They just moved here from out of state, don't know anyone here locally, that kind of thing. To keep them in that mindset, even though they may still have to actually go out and hunt and bring back a carcass today.
So I think the biggest thing on something like that is to know that I think, and I made this mistake too, just so you know. I go get my real estate license February of 2000, and I'm like, I'm here to sell a house, right? I'm ready to go. And then I'm like, I started serving people. I'm like, oh, I'm not getting paid. Oh, dear, and 6 houses a year is not going to pay the bills. So I actually had to go back to corporate America for about 6 months to have some money so that I could build my business. And what I learned from that is people think I'm going to get in, I'm going to start making money. And it doesn't happen, yes, right? The excitement of it all. But the reality is you have to think this is a long-term game. And the reason why most agents don't last more than about a year or two is because they don't know that it's a compounding system over time. And you have to be social. You have to get out there and meet people. You can't do it all online. You have to join networking groups. And I know that open houses are one of those, like, I don't want to do open houses. They don't work. That's what I've heard, right? But I think that's your best chance of getting to where the consumer is. Buyers are coming through or they're not, right? And then you have the neighbors of the sellers, right? So you have people who want to buy and sell houses right there in an open house. So to me, I feel like that's a great way, but you can absolutely get in networking groups in your church and, all the other things. But I think the key point is you may be very well connected, but if you are also not competent, then none of that matters, because people will like you, but they may not do business with you, right? So you really have to develop your competent skills also. And so to me, they say the first 2 years are your learning years, and then from there, it's your earning years.
Right.
So I know that's a long time to say, okay, I'm going to build this business for 2 years, but you got to have some money and reserves.
All right, we talked about the internet thing, and then we the emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
You write in here, and it covers a lot of actually things from how you're doing negotiations and so forth. Expand, because I think, and I brought it up, I bring it up on the show each time, so it's tough for me because I've had all these conversations, and then but it's so important that when I hear the stories and I'm reading what you've written in here, you have to be the adult in the conversation.
Yeah.
And sometimes your person, maybe buyer, seller, whatever is talking directly to you. You need to be the filter, not a pass-through.
Right.
You need to be a filter, and sometimes you might want to wait an hour before you actually say something else.
Yeah.
Because you need to be that professional and have that emotional intelligence.
Yeah. So, great kind of segue on that is, I don't know if I always had emotional intelligence. It was something I developed over time.
Mm-hmm.
So I made a lot of mistakes early in my career. And I'm just going to reference the Buffini organization, not so much because he's like, here's what you should do, here's what you should do. But that community is a community of givers and personal growth people, right? Yeah. And so I would find myself going to these conferences, kind of quiet, sitting in the back, not really talking to anybody or whatever. But anytime I talked to someone who was successful, they would say, what book are you reading? And I'm like, Stephen King? Right? Like, I'm not reading any books, right? And so I remember, and it was about 2011, maybe 2010. I have to go back and look. Maybe it was earlier than that. I lose track. I'm like, you know what? I need to start reading books. If I'm going to get to that level, that's what I need to do. But I wasn't a reader except for nonfiction. So I started Audible, was my first book. And my first book was Power of Ambition by Jim Rohn. Mm-hmm. And then that book just got
I love listening to him on YouTube. They have recordings of him.
So good, right? And so the next book and the next book and the next book. And so that's how my emotional intelligence journey began, because I started to really understand Success Principles by Jack Canfield and Boundaries by, I can't even think of his name now, but he's the emotional intelligent dude, right? Anyway, Godman, something like that. Anyway, so I got to a point where
I read the books too and can't remember all the authors.
But so what ended up happening is I committed to reading a book a month, right? That was my goal. Now I read like 4 a month, right? So to me, that's where the emotional intelligence comes in. You may have it naturally, but if you go to work on it, right, and say, how can I better myself? What can I read? What can I learn to have that emotional intelligence, so that the biggest thing is to not take things personally, right? Like, that's so important. And to be able to let go. My favorite example, I remember pulling up to my driveway. I've got a $1.5 million listing and a $2.5 million purchase. And not, just so you know, that's not my average sales price. Right? So these were two big sales. One was contingent on the other. And I'm in my driveway, and the buyer of the one I was selling backs out of the deal like a week before closing, which means that sale's not happening, and therefore the one they're buying is not happening. And I gave myself 30 seconds to like say some things out loud and scream my car, and then I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm over it. And getting on the solution side. Okay, what can I do? If anything, maybe you can't do anything, but to me, that would have 10 years before would have derailed me. I've been gone for a month. I'm going to just stay in bed for a month, right? And so my goal is to just shorten the amount of pain that I allow myself to have.
That story actually fits into one of my other questions I've been adding, because I told you I'm trying to put this book together with a premise under grit by Angela Duckworth. And I call it Everyone Needs to Create Their LLC. And love, laughter, and consistency is their grit.
So, yeah.
You just gave me the laughter.
Okay.
Because you've done this before. You were thrown a curveball that obviously, because of the price point, was even more dramatic to you, because everyone gets excited with the bigger sale that they've got. And you took that moment to scream and yell in the car, and then you probably laughed like you just did.
Yep.
About it, because
what can I do?
Yeah, what can you do? And to me, you gestured towards faith earlier. That's the way he's throwing me a curveball.
Right.
I can get upset for 30 seconds, a minute, whatever you need to do. Go hit a punching bag or something, and then you laugh about it because you've been here before. The sun's going to come up tomorrow, and you laugh about it. So I'm going to take that part out, because we just answered the laughter part of it.
Good.
Because you have the reps in to know, okay, yeah, that guy backed out. There's some reason to it, because maybe there's a better buyer coming in, or whatever it may be. Something better is going to happen, and that's your attitude, and we laugh about it.
Yep, for sure. Yeah. I could speak to the love piece too, if you'd like.
If you want to get why you love real estate, go ahead.
Well, actually, not love real estate.
That's the premise of that question.
It's not, okay.
But
so love also was not a big part of who I was. Or how I expressed it, I guess would be the way to put that. Of course, I love people, right? But in my early career, I was so worried about being considered a salesperson that I just went all in on being the professional, right? Like, okay, I memorized the contract, I know the numbers backwards and forth.
What you need to do.
Don't miss a deadline. Very important. But it really wasn't until the Great Recession and Brian Buffini being part of that organization, one of the things he has us do is write personal notes. And I know that sounds like, okay, you're writing a personal note. But what I found in that journey of committing to personal notes is that you don't write a personal note that says, I hate you, you're the worst person in the world, right? You're usually saying something of gratitude and thankfulness and how much you appreciate that person for whatever reason. And I found doing that consistently actually worked on me. It kind of cracked open that love, that heart piece of it. So, and I have these customers right now I'm working with, I don't know, we're probably in their 5th sale or something like that. And it doesn't matter what happens in my day. When I go to see them, I'm so happy because they love me, I love them. We just have this wonderful love. But I don't know, early in my career, I could have showed that because I was a little nervous, like, oh gosh, they're gonna,
if I screw this up, and
they don't think of me as a professional, then I'll be a salesperson. But it is not unusual for me to leave a client and say, bye, I love you, right, and walk away.
Well, we talked about the imposter syndrome, am I good enough, type of thing. And if you're doing the things that we're talking, yeah, you need to know the contract. You need to know you're doing all the things right, and you've shown yourself doing it. A half a dozen transactions already. You need to start having some confidence that you're probably pretty good at this.
Yep.
And you're active in the industry, and you're having these conversations, and when those people are not giving you accolades just because. I know sometimes we like to think like our neighborhood's the best neighborhood, so we want everyone to move in our neighborhood. There's other great neighborhoods. That you are doing a good job. Be proud of yourself and be confident and expect that relationship and go after it. Like you're saying, you go and start creating it because that person's going to say great things about it when the transaction's over too, just like the last one.
And I would also add this little tweak to that. Don't hold tight to the results. If you just give and give. And one of my favorite sayings is never grow weary in doing good, right? Because sometimes you can grow weary. But what I found, especially when I feel like sometimes I want to give up, just keep going, keep giving, keep loving, right? And so
I'm gonna hold that clip because every time I do a podcast. But
okay.
All right, so we talked about emotional intelligence. That was that thing. Let me just flip the page here because I got all these markers in here.
I love that you did that. It's so fun.
Well, either whether it was the title of the chapter or your bold sections in here where you kind of make a quote, and some of this is if I want to use common sense or anything, but I think it's stuff that I want to hear you kind of expand on, this one here, whatever chapter this is here, you're talking about spending the time, which I think goes into the buyer-broker agreement now. Agents, for the most part, they might have been meeting, but they weren't going in depth like they are. And I'm finding agents tell me they're making more money now on deals than they were prior to the buyer-broker agreement because they are sitting down and really explaining their value. And you talk about just consult with the client and give advice and guidance and the best possible solution because you're taking the time now to actually talk about your value. Now you got to listen to them and what their challenge, what is it they want, need, and all that kind of things. They're actually spending the time to actually then spit out an intelligent plan. This is what we're going to do, or this is why I'm going to show you this house because, that kind of thing. But tell us were you doing buyer broker agreements before? And how are you doing differently now?
Yeah, great question. Mm-hmm. So my buyer journey is an interesting one because I remember early in my career saying, I love this so much I would do it for free. And I really did. I mean, I meant that. It was easy because I did a lot of new construction. You put a deal together, it closed, you got paid, right? Like there was not that drama in the middle. And so again, back to Brian Buffini, he's always taught to do a buyer consultation. And so I developed a consultation package and I've been using that one, since 2007. So, and every year, at one point I had a piece of paper about buying short sales and foreclosures, right? And there was a whole document in that we would talk through because that was an option. Now I took that piece of paper out because we're not seeing that anymore, right? But I would always encourage my buyers to meet me at the office and let's just spend an hour together going over what I call a strategy session. Like, okay, what are your goals? Here's our process. How do we put those together? So I've always believed in, not always, since Buffini, to do a buyer's consultation. So the buyer-broker agreement, I will tell you, I went through some post-traumatic recession disorder when the last couple of years have been a little harder, right? And I thought, oh gosh, we're going to lose it again, and I had to do some work on that. But I will say I was fearful when the lawsuit came. Actually, the first emotion was I was angry because I took it very personally. They're like realtors, they're all colluding and whatever it is that the lawsuit was about. And I had always been and still am the type of agent that if a buyer needs my help or a seller needs my help, I don't think about the money. I'm like, okay, let's go to work. Let's help these people. The money will follow, right? And because of this lawsuit, now I have to look at the money. And I never did.
Yeah.
I never really cared like what the percentage was or whatever. I'm just like, that's
I mean,
the
you
house
weren't
we
getting
buy.
zero,
I
but
wasn't getting zero.
yeah.
I might have cared if there was a big zero, but
Yeah.
But I would say
You
this.
just browse over it, say that's good. We're getting this deal done, and move on.
Actually, there would be many times where, not many, occasionally would come up where a client would find a house that wasn't listed, so it didn't have a compensation, and I would contact the seller and see if they would be willing to compensate, and they said no, and so I would go back to my buyer and say, I'll still help you for free. And I did. I called it my pro bono work, right? You're putting good energy out there. So, but now I have to look at it and explain it. But to your point, I believe that this is the
Did you ever do any of the pro bono work?
Oh, I do. I do pro bono work all the time, still to this day.
Because the buyer broker agreement now actually, inserts that situation to go back. Because I imagine now you're thinking, okay, they don't have money to compensate me. So you tell them, hey, okay, to make this happen, they don't want to pay me. So we need to offer a little bit more to, so they can pay your side. That conversation now, I imagine, evolved for those who weren't thinking through it before the buyer broker.
So I'm going to change the language just a little bit about that, because when we say pay me, that's actually not what's happening. The seller is reimbursing the buyer for their cost. If that makes sense. The buyer does have to pay me. So yes, that is a true statement.
Yeah, they're taking a higher loan amount.
The seller,
whatever.
I've been using the words, I'm not saying what is the buyer compensating me? Or what is the seller compensating me? I'm saying, what is the seller reimbursing the buyer for their BBA?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what they're doing, is they're covering that. So I'm just switching that language just a little bit. But typically, once I've signed a buyer broker agreement and I've established my value, we really haven't had much problems with that. Occasionally, you'll get that seller who says, I'm not doing anything. And I have a letter to the seller that I've written explaining the importance of having seasoned, excellent, a buyer agent on the other side, and why they're worth what they're worth, right? And I'll send that over to the listing agent and I say, please present this to your seller. So I've done that a few times. If I get a seller who's pushing back on not offering anything, so
just for the audience, because there's different, because there's different angles on this part. As a list, if you're representing the seller, your listing agent, are you broadcasting that, and in the ways that you can, what the seller, because I meant when you have that the seller consultation, you're talking about, hey, are we willing to put some money to the side to compensate the buyer because we know that's going to come? Are you broadcasting that? Or are you telling the buyer's agent, make an offer and we'll work from there?
I will not do the make an offer. I think that's bad for our industry. And I think that it ties the agent's worth to the offer. And those are two separate conversations. So when I am but I will say this, and this is a kind of spin. We're in a market where it's more of a buyer's agent market. We're in that 4 to 6 months of inventory, right? That could shift. If we were back in 2022, let's just say that, 21, right, where everybody was paying more than asking, covering appraisal gaps, buying it as is, they were throwing it at everything. That might be a market where buyer's agents don't get paid from the seller, because a buyer is going to have to step up and say, I want that house. I'm willing to pay my own agent's compensation in order to get it, right? But that's a seller's market, and that was extreme seller's market. We're going to be balanced or more buyer for now. So the approach I'm taking now is to encourage my sellers to offer. And yes, I absolutely use it. Think of it as an incentive and a marketing tool. You know, what do builders do when they need to sell their property, right? Or their, listings or whatever. They're like offering to pay their closing costs. They're offering to buy down their rate. They're offering incentives.
Yeah.
And that's what sellers need to do in this market environment right now.
Currently, yeah. All right, Chapter 3, Analysis and Promotion. Position yourself to win.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
So again, it kind of pulls back to my statistics background, but when a seller is hiring an agent, generally the old school thought process is, this agent's going to sell my house. But the reality is that's a smaller likelihood. Like if you really look at all the sales happen because of the internet and the availability of people to look online, most of the time, a lot of time the buyers find the house, before the agent even knows about
Yeah.
it, right? Now, I know in 21 and 22, I sold a lot of my own listings to my own buyers because,
Beautiful thing.
right? It was good because it was low inventory. And so when a house that I knew about was listed, I could
And
find
you had a
buyer,
buyer
right?
waiting in line for
Yep,
this. Yeah.
exactly. So, but in general, it's probably less than 1% of agents that find the actual buyer. Now, when you get into like high end, $20 million properties and stuff, that's a different dynamic, right? But I'm just talking about the everyday agent and the everyday buyer and seller. So when I get a listing opportunity, and this is the other kind of switch, a lot of heavy listing agents, they just want their signs in yards. And they're like, okay, if I get 10 listings and 2 sell, that's great because my signs are in yards. I look at it as one listing, one sale. Like, how can I help this seller accomplish their goal? And so the analysis and promotion, I have a very, very detailed statistical view on pricing. Pricing is like your number one marketing
That was
tool.
actually my segue because I got it marked right here.
Yes, price matters, right? And now, do I get these sellers says, but I want to price a little high? Do I have a couple of those now? Yes, right? Like, so it's that emotional intelligence. I'm not going to take it personally. I've given you my best data. If you choose to ignore it, that is your choice, right? But, here's where I think we need to be, right? So I really do that. And then understanding trends. And this is I learned this during the Great Recession. When I actually sold a lot of short sales during that time because I saw the trend going down. So I would tell a seller, if you price just below where it's going, you'll be the next sale that happens. And they would get it. And who wants to tell a seller you have to price just a little bit lower than what everybody else is doing? Usually it's like, I want to price higher than that because my house is better, whatever. But if you have their trust and you are truly doing it to help them accomplish their goals.
And have the facts.
Like it's a statistical analysis. Then you just figure out where to position yourself, right? So when I say position, it could be a little lower, or if the market is like it was in 21 and 22, I'm like, we could probably push this up 50 grand. I don't know, let's play with that a little bit.
Well, so. you use the phrase elephant in the room.
Yes.
And having that intelligent conversation using your emotional intelligence. Yeah. And, because I see it on a daily, and I'm not on everybody's email, but I will get when someone's at price reduction. I get 2 or 3 a day coming to my email, and that's just whatever handful of agents that whatever got my email and is in their database or whatever. And with the 12,000 agents in the area, obviously listings are growing, or we have plenty of inventory back now. It's happening all over the place. Price reduction. And I mean, of those, if we looked at the last 90 days of everyone who did a price reduction, you would say that 90% of them probably didn't price the home correctly up front.
So that's a great question. First, I want to say the elephant in the room, to reference that, is I always say no amount of marketing is going to sell an overpriced house, right? So a seller wants to see what marketing you're going to do, right? And yes, do we have a very robust marketing plan? Yes. Do we use a lot of social and get to expose the property? That's very, very important. But if you overprice it, you've just killed all the marketing that you just did. And so, back to your question, at the end of the day, I'm trying to help a seller be the next sale that's going to happen. And when you do have a lot of inventory, you've got to compete. But price is a range. So I'm talking very statistic. It's a science and a little bit of art, right? And so the art piece is where you might have priced it a little high, and then you have to make a reduction to get it right, because you still don't know exactly what any one buyer is going to do, right? And so whenever I do a price analysis, it's always a range. Here's what I think is worst case, middle, and then we might be able to go here, right? But if we try here within 3 weeks and we haven't gotten any showings or offers or whatever, blah, 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 we're making a reduction because we need to get it. To sit on the market, the only caveat to this, and I had this happen, it was in Deer Creek. Lovely home for sale. I had the range of what it should sell for. It didn't have a pool and didn't have room for a pool. So other houses were selling that had pools and room for pools. And ours did not, but I still think we were priced right. So it could be priced right, but you got to analyze it and look at it. And then one of my last favorite sayings is, price isn't always the problem, but it is often the solution, right? So, if it was on the market for $1, would it sell? Yes, right?
Yeah.
So you just got to figure out that price that is going to make it sell.
Right. I had a question and I lost it because it's such a what is your attitude, ideology, plan? Especially now, I think every agent probably has or has had in the last year a home that is in a community that's still got construction going on. Mm-hmm. So we're competing against these builders that are buying blocks of money. The buy rate's down. They're putting a lot out there, which is being built into the price of the home. Okay. But now you got this person's got this year-old home and they've got to leave. Yeah. And they're trying to sell that house. Are you just to give a pretense of why one reason why houses, but any house sitting on the market, are you going out there and saying, hey seller, okay, we can list it at this price, but here's what we need. We need to make sure that there's the buyer's compensation in there because there's value to the buyer there. We're offering a buy down incentive of $10,000, whatever, all these things being built in there because you've got to match up a lot of times with these builders and all the things that they're offering. So if you want to offer this higher price, you better be advertising that you're offering all these incentives along with it.
So I'm going to say that I take an opposite approach because buyers, if you're a buyer, you type in your price range first, mm-hmm. Then maybe location, then maybe number of bedrooms, bathrooms, right? Like price is the first thing. And if you see a house that's priced higher, you're going to do one of two things. You're going to go, what makes that one so great? And you're going to try and look at the pictures and figure it out. And you may just ignore it and say that seller's overpriced.
Right. You're not reading the details.
Right. Yeah. You're just moving on.
Or even understand.
Right. What it all means. Right. Mm-hmm. So, and when I work with buyers, one nice thing about my business, even though I've grown to the level that I have, I still work about 50-50 buyers and sellers. Mostly because someone who's selling is also buying. So I got, both of those. But because I get to see both sides of that equation, I can help my sellers because I know how buyer behavior is, right? So to be just a listing agent, you might lose the pulse over the touch of what's going on with buyers. Right. And same thing when I'm consulting with a buyer, I'm like, okay, I've been with a lot of sellers. I know where they go, and how to manage that. And so typically I would say, let's get the price right. And then we can negotiate the other things. Right. If they want those incentives or whatever, let's negotiate them. Right. But the key thing you just said, though, it's really important, is the ability to have hard conversations. Mm-hmm. And that's that emotional intelligence piece. And I've had 2 listings. They're still in my heart, in pain, over the last 2 years because they bought at the peak in 2022, new construction. So new construction's still going on. And now 2 years later, they're being relocated, one to Virginia, one to Utah, and their house is worth less than what they paid for it at the peak of the market. And
because of what the builder's doing.
Because of what the builders are doing. Yeah. And they're just incentivizing. And so those have been difficult, painful, long-term things. And I think as a listing agent, you have to not take it personally, but also give as best advice you can. Yeah. And help them through the emotional roller coaster.
You agree with what I'm going to say. If you're newer to the industry, but you still already know more than the buyer that enlister that you're likely working with,
right.
99% of the time, they don't know more than you do, and don't let them think they do.
Right.
Just because they've bought and sold some home and you're only 25 years old, but if you sold a dozen homes already, you've already been through a lot more than they have because you've seen the inside, the back office, so to speak. That the tough conversation. Maybe early on you've got to practice it because maybe you don't have the confidence that you have the credibility yet.
Right.
You do have the knowledge, and to sit down with a senior person in the office like yourself and say, I need to have this hard conversation with my buyer. Will you role play with me?
Yep.
And practice that. So when you go in, you can have that conversation and feel confident about it. And it's your confidence that's going to sell the solution.
That, and I would always say, know this. 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, frustration, disappointment, and acceptance. So if you're having a conversation with somebody who thinks this, but you know it to be this, they're still in denial, right? And it is our job to gently and gracefully help them get through disappointment and frustration to acceptance, right? Like that's ultimately our goal. And sometimes I can do that in a weekend. Someone's like, okay, we're going to do this, and nothing happens. We're like, all right, I'm ready to now listen. Sometimes it takes 6 months, right, to get through those stages of grief. And I speak in terms of grief because we're in a tough market right now, and so you have to have those harder conversations. Obviously, when things were going great for sellers, right, in the heyday, then the grief was with the buyers, right? Am I ever going to get a house? This is my fourth
Or how many
offer.
deals that, 20 offers in and they're not getting one accepted.
I'm just going to quit, All right, so don't be in denial. Let's get through this frustration. We'll get you to the acceptance.
Yeah, we all know a few of those that went back to renting or whatever. Well, that segues into the next in chapter 4, negotiating with expertise, no drama. Yeah.
That's my favorite. So save the drama for your mama. So with negotiation, I've studied a lot on negotiation. Taken Chris Voss, he's an excellent negotiator. Taken his course. I'm actually.
Is that the FBI? The master class or whatever?
So
is that right?
He's so good. And actually, he has Brian Buffini is doing a 3-hour. Zoom webinar with him next Thursday. And so,
wow.
Again, I'm like...
share me that link or share me that whatever that ad and I can put it out and make sure everyone on the...
But I say that because it's, again, just like emotional intelligence, you may be an okay negotiator, but our culture generally isn't, when you go to buy some milk, you pay whatever the asking price is, right? And you're checking out, right? We're not a culture of, hey, will you take $3? We don't have that. And so for most people, that's kind of uncomfortable, right? To have that. And so you said earlier about, being that buffer, right? Like, drives me crazy when I see an agent and they just send me whatever, right? There's a lot of drama associated with that, or ego, which I didn't really talk about in my book, but we've got ego and drama. And so knowing like, okay, how do I approach this person and understanding their negotiation style. Brian Buffini does a lot of training on the 8 different types of negotiators, recognizing what their type is, recognizing my type, recognizing what the listing agent's type is. You can kind of get a sense of where you need to do that. But I would say if there was one skill that an agent could work on, it would be their negotiation skills, because we're just not used to that. So.
Well, in understanding the cultural differences that you're talking about, we have a lot of our Indian friends here, and they are hagglers. They're going to work you.
Yeah.
And you got to understand at some point you have to say no.
Right.
Yeah.
He who can walk away first wins. There's another little,
That's in the book.
Drop, right, that's exactly. It is.
I'm just going to read what I had marked this, but ultimately, professional real estate agents should use a balance of assertiveness and cooperation when helping clients approach a negotiation of their real estate transaction.
Yes. So, so there's 2 types of personalities. You've got the motivator and then you've got the facilitator, right? So a motivator is someone who can come in and be like, okay, this is what we should do. And that type, right? I'm wired that way. Like, this is my advice. But then you have the facilitator type personality, and believe it or not, our population is more facilitator heavy than it is motivator heavy. Who wants to give options and let the client choose, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But the client came to us for advice, right? So if you're like, here's your options, what would you like to do as we move forward, right? Here's my advice. Here's what I recommend. And so sometimes if you're the facilitator personality, you've got to work on being a little more motivator. If you're more motivator, you actually have to work on tapping that down a little bit, because sometimes that could come across too pushy or like, don't tell me what to do, whatever. So I have to find that balance.
So with all the sales training, because I've been in sales pretty much my entire life, we've always learned, give them an A or B option. There very rarely should be a C option. It should be, but you want to premise that question, do you want A or B, by your facts, your knowledge, what they're hiring you. My recommendation based on what you told me would be option A, but here's another option just to give you another option. And I think 75 or higher probably is still going to go with what you actually recommend.
Absolutely. Yep. And then you just got pros and cons. Like every decision in a negotiation, there's pros and cons. and being able to spell that out. So one of the things I do, I don't know if it's the right way to do it, but I will have a conversation on the phone, but often I will type it up in an email first. Because sometimes when you're having a negotiation conversation, there's emotion tied to it. And to be able to push that down a little bit and then give you some time to read it, digest
Get your full thought.
Get your full thought, and then react, right? So often I'll say, hey, let me send you a detailed email of what we're going to be discussing. Then once you've read it, then we'll jump on a call and discuss it. And then that way, I feel like that helps people.
Yeah, and it helps me when I get into situations with loans, because you're looking at numbers, say, well, here's your numbers here, and this is your costs and so forth, and this is what your payment will end up being if you go with that type of loan, and versus something you have to put it in writing,
yes,
so they can see it. Then you can get on the phone and talk about it. You see that there are two different options. Oh yeah, and you highlight obviously the important things they need to know, and then they can make a decision that they feel confident about.
Yep. I always like to say my job is to give them the information they need to make an informed decision.
All right. Chapter 5 is skilled transaction management, smoothing a bumpy ride. And I want to actually segue that into something we had gestured earlier. You built your team, and I heard you on one of the other shows talking about, you got I think it is a transaction coordinator to help you leave, because I think that's kind of part of smoothing out the ride.
Sure.
If you're going to do a number of transactions, and then still live a life, you've got all these things going on. You need that assistant. So talk a little bit, and this is kind of outside the book, because we're talking now just real estate business for agents that are there or will eventually be there, where they're just so busy they've got to start leveraging other people to help them, so that they can keep moving forward. You're not just stuck with, I can only go this far every year. At what point did you come to that decision, and what were some of the decisions that you made, and options that there's probably more options today than of where they could go first than when you had, but how your whole thought process and what it's done to your business, and how you've been able to grow. Obviously you're paying a little bit to that other person, but it's grown your financial, because you're able to do more transactions.
So there's a great book called E-Myth Revisited. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Yep. I don't know how I got that in my hands early in my career. I want to say by 2004, within, I hired it was 20 years ago, because that's my girl's been with me for 20 years. And when I read that book, it was like a light bulb moment. I'm like, yes, I can do all the tasks, but if I'm going to run a business, I need to figure out the highest and best use of my time and delegate the rest. And so I remember, and the other thing I'll say about hiring a transaction coordinator is you can hire someone who has their own business, and they're helping many agents.
Right. I call them pay for play.
Right. Yeah. And I think that is a good first step because a lot of times, this is my journey anyway. No one can do it as good as me, right? Actually, they do it better. So that's the reality, is when you find someone who is actually really good at transaction management, and they can sit behind a desk all day and make sure that all the paperwork is exactly right. If you're in sales, most likely that's not your highest skill, is all the admin type work or whatever. So I remember hiring her, but because I hired my own person and I did have a company for a while, right? But I'm like, I really want to customize my process with my clients, and this other transaction manager has their own process, right? Yep. So I think as a stepping stone, that's a good place to kind of be comfortable letting some of the details, let someone else.
Well, you want to know what their job is too. You want to see what they're actually doing. You might tweak it to your personality, but if you've never been a transaction coordinator, you don't even know where to start writing the instructions.
Yeah. So that year, I remember she would come to my house. I would teach her everything. She'd write notes. We'd create operations manuals. We did everything. So I guess what I would say is, if you hire your own person, one, it takes time. So no agent's like, I don't have time. Right. No, that's why you need a transaction coordinator. But the second is that you will get better at your systems because you're teaching them to someone else, right? Like, here's how I do this, and here's how I do that. And they're like, oh, maybe we should do this a little differently.
Oh, wait, I skipped a step there. Hold on a second. We need to do this first.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I found it actually made me a better agent having a transaction manager. But the biggest thing, to your point, it gave me bandwidth to sell more homes,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I was like at a plateau and I just kept hitting this like wall. I couldn't do more than 20, 25. And I was like, I'm out of time. And I think it was, I can't remember what year it was, but January is one of those kickoff, everybody's like, all right, I'm ready to buy a house. And I couldn't serve everybody because I just did not have the time. And that's when I knew I needed to hire someone because I was missing out on opportunities. So that was my first hire. And then what I found as my business grew, and it's a compounding business, so you could literally.
So you have someone on payroll now for you.
Yes.
Right. They're not through. I mean, they're not with Better Homes as part of their greater team. They're yours.
Work just for me. Yeah. So initially, when I first started, I hired somebody. She was in North Carolina or something like that, and that worked okay, right? But I really wanted my own person. She's been with me for 20 years. But about 10, 11 years ago, so she basically helped me get from 20 deals to 30, where I could handle 30 fairly well. But then when I found out when you're doing about 30, 35 deals a year, then you are out a lot, right? And you're not behind a desk. And so I'll be showing a house. They want to make an offer, but I'm not going to be back to my desk until 7 p.m. And then, doing it at night. So I hired an operations manager who sits behind the desk, and that's her whole job, is to be like my at-a-desk person while I'm running around. And she helped me be able to scale from about 30 to about 40, 45 deals a year. Because now I've got someone typing up the paperwork. Because typing paperwork, as long as I tell them what needs to be in the blanks, they can type it, right?
Yeah.
I've got someone who can pull listing.
Now, are they licensed?
No license.
Okay.
These are all staff. So I really followed the what did I just call that book? No,
E-Myth.
E-Myth Revisited, right? I took that very seriously. Like, I'm trying to hire off the low dollar person, or the lower cost, my hourly rate versus what that work should be done, right? And so transaction coordinator, operations manager, not need to be licensed. But then I found, okay, now I'm starting to do 50 deals a year, 60 deals a year. Now I can't be everywhere, right? And so that's when I got a license. I'm getting licensed help, meaning they're helping, like showing agent. Opening doors is really the biggest one, but even getting my lockbox and sign, or meeting an appraiser, or sitting at a home inspection for 3 hours. So I don't need to be doing all of those things.
Right.
And so I have a licensed person I have multiple licensed people. And what I've done in my business, because of where I am in my career, it's kind of a trade. I will mentor, right? If you'll help me, right? So for free, I'm not trying to coach you. I don't have a coaching business, right? Brian Buffini does that way better than I ever would, right? But in trade, I'll give you everything I have. Here's all my buyer consultations. Here's my seller consultations. Here's the email that I write.
Well, the systems that you've evolved over 25 years, and you're still tweaking them all the time, making them better. And I think that's where that new agent, to be able to come in and apprentice under you, because that's really what they're doing. I've talked about this with other agents. Because there's such a low bar to get in, pass a test, you have a license. Okay, now you can.
Now what?
They can sell a house for the same amount of money that you can.
Yep.
You're not getting paid by how many CE credits you have or anything. Although you need to take some to keep your license. There's some of these people have all these, because they enjoy being educated and confident and stuff, that they have all these endorsements, I guess you call them. But they don't get paid anymore.
Yeah.
It's just part of your business. But I don't know where I'm going to go with that, because I had to throw that little. I do what Trump does. I throw the. What is it? He calls it. I forget what he calls it. We're talking about on Joe Rogan. He goes out and he brings the story back. But
we're talking about licensed help. Trading in the apprentice.
Well, just to get in if you want to get in this business right now, and I think my last question I'm going to end with you is just what should agents be doing, or even new agents be doing right now today with this market? That's going to be my last question. But if you could find someone like yourself who is doing 30, 40, 50 deals or more, that is willing to let you come in as an apprentice, you're not making as much as if you sold a house, but you're going to see many more transactions at a year or two of that apprenticeship. You're going to be spinning off on your own.
Yeah. One of I've helped many agents over the years, and this kind of steps into my leadership journey a little bit, because I did not want to be salesperson and leadership. Those two things. I don't need any of that, right? But I have found that as you get more skills, like people come to you, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? But what I would say is, and I have someone in mind in particular I'm thinking of, she'll say, I'm just doing what you're doing, Wendy. I'm just doing what you're doing, right? I'm not trying to recreate it or do, fix something that's not broken. Now, do I do it perfectly? No, definitely not, right? But I have good foundation, and I can get someone jump started. And if they just do the things and then have the faith, right? And she's killing it now, right? Yeah. And I'm just like, I just love when I watch someone do that versus there's some resistance. I want to do it my way. I want to do it my way, which of course, absolutely do it your way. We all are different.
Do you find they do that because they're uncomfortable? Like, for instance, there's some people who can go into an office, as we know, there's some brokerages, that's what they go in and, from 9 to 11 or whatever, they're making all these phone calls. Right. That's their structure. Those people like doing that. They're structured, for whatever reason, they like doing that. There's others, obviously, that despise that part of it. So there's something that you're doing that they don't feel comfortable doing, so they want to recreate something else to replace it that's theirs and they're comfortable doing.
That, and again, I'm just look back at my journey. For example, one of Brian Buffini's things, it says host a client party, right? And I didn't want to host a client party. I'm like, no one's going to come. I'm like, so nervous. But that's what he said you need to do to keep those relationships, right? And so I remember, out of just faith, all right, I'm going to do it, right? And so then I'm like, okay, people did come. I'll do it again, and I'll do it again, and I'll do it again.
More people, more and more people. Yep.
And but let's say you don't want to do client parties, right? Or you're very uncomfortable with that, stepping on your own comfort zone. So one of the things I've noticed with agents is I'm like, well, what if we could do it in community? Right? Like, okay, you don't want to do your own client party, but what if there were 2 other agents with you and all 3 of you did them or something like that, right? Same thing with business mixers, same things with a lot of the tenants that you can be doing, but some people are just so uncomfortable, and it's the 80-20 rule, right? Like at the end of
That's
the day.
in the book too.
Yes, it is. Like you can get a license, you can do okay in the business, but if you really want to make it a career, get in that 20%, top 20. Yeah.
This has been a great episode.
Good.
This has been jam packed. I think you ought to put this on your website. I would be just flattered to actually, if you shared it with all your people at Better Homes,
sure.
Especially the new agents coming in, and these people are asking, say, hey, watch because I think we covered a lot.
Yes.
Which hopefully will lead them to actually read the book and get the between the lines information.
That's right.
Yeah. Let's finish with this. Just your recommendation right now, the current marketplace. We've got listings are growing. Interest rates there's no real sign of them dropping anytime soon. It is what it is. What should every agent be doing right now?
So I'm going to tell you it's been...
Or 2 or 3 things maybe.
Right, It's been a hard couple of years, right? I say that. I had a great year last year, which is really funny because it doesn't
Well, I want to say, because that was the question. I've seen, looking at agents' numbers, what some people did in 2023, are down a little bit. They're still doing good because they're good agents, but they're down a couple million or whatever, where other agents have excelled in this market.
Yeah. And so I think that it's all back to mindset again, because 2023 was a tough year for me because my mindset got off. That lawsuit, everything was just like,
oh my God, what's going to happen?
Yeah, just really, and, they put the brakes on interest rates, or whatever. And so it just, it happened very fast, and it was scary, especially when you don't have reserves or income. And luckily I've been in the Buffini system long enough to work through all that. But to answer your question specifically, the mantra that I have been saying is go deeper, go deeper, go deeper. And what I mean by that is, when the market's going well, you can stay at a high level and be successful, right? But when it gets
when
harder,
you got the current and the wind behind you, you can swim fast or fly fast.
So what I'm doing is for 2025 is to look at my client list and say, who are my very best advocates? Who are they, right? Make a list. Remember them all the time. Now, I always do remember them, but I also have 850 past clients, right? Yeah. So I have to really go deeper with the ones who I know.
A little extra love.
Yeah, that I know are out there fighting for me. Like, even if it doesn't turn into a deal, because that's the reality. No matter how hard we try, we can't create demand, right? That's not our job. Our job is to facilitate the demand. But we can put ourselves in opportunity that when this market shifts, and it will, we're going to be the one, right? And that's the way I looked at during the Great Recession. I didn't do it purposefully. Now I look back, I'm like, that's how this happened.
Be more intentful.
I just kept showing up, wanting to quit. It was the hardest thing I could do during those times, to show up. I just want to stay in bed. But because I did all of those relationships that I poured into during that 5-year period, when the market started to get better again, I couldn't see straight. I was so busy, right? Yeah. And so that's the way I look at it right now. We can't create something that doesn't exist, but we can really deepen our relationships. Use this as an opportunity to set yourself up for when it does shift.
Well, it's a really good time to read your book.
Thank you.
and start inputting some of the things that you're talking about. And again, this is not rocket science.
Yeah.
You're just putting it all on paper.
Yeah.
This is stuff that works. Maybe follow Buffini if that's who you choose to follow, and start implementing their plans, because you have time to, you're not running around, signs in the yard, got multiple offers. You have some time now to start putting your systems in play.
Absolutely.
Making everything, giving that great foundation, so when it's there, you're ready to take off.
And you talked about earlier in the very beginning about setting your goals and just thinking in terms of the month or the next quarter. Every year I sit down and we do a very extensive, not just goals. I don't like the word goals so much as what's my vision for my life, right? 5 years from now, back up 3 years, and then how am I going to implement that this year, right? So now is a great time to be putting those implementation ideas in place.
Because the one thing we on the LLC we didn't talk about, and it really sums it up: consistency.
For sure.
You've got to put these systems in play, and you got to stick with them no matter what.
My favorite example on that was one of my very first client parties I ever decided to do was a pumpkin patch. It was like 2007, I think, was my first one. And then we're in the Great Recession, and I didn't have the emotional energy in 2009 to host it. So I think I hosted it once, twice, maybe 3 times, and then it was like,
took a year off.
I did. I just didn't have the emotional energy. It was just like really, really tough times. And my customers were calling me, "Are you having your pumpkin patch this year?" I'm like, "Okay, I will never miss the pumpkin patch again." And so now I don't think we're on 17th year, 18th year, something like that. And I have clients who came when their kids they didn't have kids, they had little baby kids, now they're teenagers, college age, So it's that consistency. They can count on that every October I'm going to be hosting a pumpkin patch. Whether they come or not doesn't matter.
And one year it rained, and one year it was colder, not so many showed up, whatever was going on that weekend, but you kept doing it.
And the key thing is, it's not necessarily about the event itself, is that the fact you have an opportunity to reach out to your database
invite
in
them.
a giving way. That's 30 days before, and then 30 days after, thanking them for coming. So I do at least 4 client parties a year, sometimes 5. So.
Well, you like you said, you're putting out all the invitations, you're contacting them, social, whatever it is, content, and then you're posting the pictures, and everybody having a great. You have 2 months worth of content right there, just planning before and after your hosting party.
And it's a giving system, right?
Yeah.
So, and I can't tell you how many times this has happened. I get the phone call, "Wendy, it's been 10 years. And they've not talked to me.
God, isn't that just like...
And then they go, "But thank you so much for staying in contact and inviting me to all your things over the years. But now I need to sell my house. I'm moving to California, right?"
Yeah. Well, hopefully not.
Me, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, at the end of the day, you can't hold so tight to the result.
Yeah.
You just got to come at it with an open hand. Like, I'm here to serve.
It's that, I call it, what do they say? Leap off the cliff and figure out how to fly on your way down. And when you start building up that momentum that you're talking about, and it's that time, it's like, oh man, I haven't had a call in a couple of days. I don't know what's going on. And what's my next client? You make that leap of faith, and the person from 10 years ago calls you out of the blue. You're like, oh my God, how they've been actually reading my stuff.
Yeah. You don't even know.
I appreciate you. Come on. This has been a great show. There's a lot of content. Thank you. I appreciate that. Those are listening. Please like, subscribe, all those good things. Wendy's show. See, today is Friday. The audio will go out on Monday. I should have the Facebook video. The YouTube video is already, of course, is streaming there now, but the formalized one should go by Monday morning as well. And then we'll see some reels next week. But just solid content for the entire time. We could probably talk for